graduation season, right? All these colleges, you're seeing everybody graduate, and high schools are starting to do it. And somebody who had a special graduation in her family that she's celebrating, which I will get to on the back end of this first clip, is Sunny Hostin. We talked about The View and how dumb they are. Here's, just in case you forgot, Sunny Hostin's view of America.
I worry about my children's future, especially my daughter, who now has less rights than I have.
It's stolen land, first of all. Okay, California's stolen land.
The biggest threat to our country today, says the FBI's director, is white supremacy.
For years, Sunny Hostin has carried herself on The View with the confidence of someone who believes she's not just part of the conversation, but above it. Every point lands with the weight of a verdict. Every disagreement feels less like a difference of opinion and more like a failure to meet her moral standard. On that set, in that environment, the formula works. It gives her authority, it gives her control, and it gives the impression that once she has spoken, the discussion is over.
His reaction to Sunny Hostin's stupidity in this video is everything. Check it out.
If America is not the #1 global power, it's not going to be Denmark. It's going to be communist China, a country that right now the government is imprisoning Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps. It is a deeply racist government. It's a human rights violating government. It is a government that if they are the leader of the free world, we are not a free world the way that we are right now.
But that impression starts to weaken the moment someone steps in who isn't impressed by the performance. And that's exactly what happened when Megyn Kelly turned her focus towards Sunny Hostin. This wasn't a simple disagreement over politics or culture. It was something far more cutting. Megyn didn't just challenge Sunny's opinions. She challenged the entire image behind them. She took aim at the delivery, the posture, the familiar rhythm of outrage and certainty, and she reframed it all as something much less impressive than it was meant to appear. What had long been presented as authority suddenly started to look like theater.
Fear not, Sunny, because look at the picture she posted just the other day. Here is her son graduating from Harvard. Yes, her black son graduated from Harvard, even though it's a country of white supremacists, and she's deeply, deeply worried for his future. I'm sure he has no chance ahead of him, Stu. The effing nerve.
That is what made the criticism hit so hard, because once that frame is in place, everything begins to look different. The dramatic pauses no longer feel powerful. The heavy tone no longer feels profound. The solemn expressions and moral declarations stop sounding fearless and start sounding rehearsed. Instead of seeing a commentator in command of the moment, the audience starts to see a personality relying on a very polished routine.
I think she went to Binghamton undergrad, and she went to Notre Dame Law School, which is a great law school. Her son right now is at Harvard. That son she wants us to think is sitting there oppressed, who she's got to fight on behalf of because America is so awful to him. They're educating him right now at Harvard University.
And once people notice the routine, it becomes difficult to ignore. Megyn's sharpest point seems to be that Sunny often presents herself as a voice of justice, empowerment, and truth, while her delivery can come across as something much colder. Not conviction, but disdain. Not strength, but scolding. There is a difference between speaking with authority and speaking as though everyone else in the room is beneath you. And Megyn's critique draws attention to that difference with brutal clarity.
Of The View. Speaking of Sunny Hostin, take a look at SOT 15.
I worry about the working class. I worry about my mother, a retired teacher. I worry about our elderly and their Social Security and their Medicare. I worry about my children's future, especially my daughter, who now has less rights than I have. And I remember my father telling me many, many years ago that I was the first person in his family to enjoy full civil rights. And now I have less civil rights than I had.
Because if your version of strength only seems to appear when you are lecturing people, dismissing disagreement, and treating opposition like a moral defect, then eventually people begin to wonder whether that strength is real at all. Maybe it is not strength. Maybe it is simply a performance that has been rewarded for so long, it no longer gets questioned. That is where the image really begins to crack. Sunny's presence on television has often been built around seriousness. The tone is measured. The expressions are deliberate. The disappointment is carefully signaled. There is always a sense that what she is saying carries moral weight. But Megyn's roast turns that style into the target itself. She suggests that the performance of seriousness is doing much of the work, that the packaging is often more convincing than the argument underneath it. And that observation changes the way the audience sees everything that follows.
Sunny Hostin over on The View, accusing Israel of war crimes.
There is an international human rights body of law. And when you look at that law, part of it is retaliation against innocent civilians collectively is also.
Because now it is no longer just about whether Sunny is right or wrong on a particular issue. It becomes about the pattern, the same posture, the same certainty, the same polished outrage, the same feeling that the conclusion was locked in long before the conversation even began. What once looked commanding now starts to feel predictable. What once sounded bold now starts to sound repetitive. And predictability is a dangerous thing for a public commentator.
The biggest threat to our country today, says the FBI's director, is white supremacy and domestic terrorism. Merrick Garland said the biggest threat to our democracy is white supremacy and domestic terrorism. How do you come together when it's homegrown terror? And we have never addressed why there is that issue that remains in this country 400 years later.
So we have white supremacists running around this country. It's the biggest threat we face. And she's deeply worried about her children's.
The moment viewers feel they can predict every expression, every moral lesson, and every outraged reaction before it arrives, the performance loses something important. It loses the sense of discovery. It loses the sense of authenticity. It stops feeling like a real exchange and starts feeling like a familiar role being replayed on cue. That is another part of why Megyn's criticism lands. She makes Sunny seem less like a fearless voice entering debate and more like a television figure reciting a part she has mastered.
Sunny Hostin over on The View, accusing Israel of war crimes.
There is an international human rights body of law. And when you look at that law, part of it is retaliation against innocent civilians collectively is also terror and is also a war crime.
What Israel is saying consistently is, if you want your water, if you want your electricity, release our hostages. In my view, that's not.
Then there is the issue of disagreement itself. In Megyn's framing, Sunny does not always treat opposing views as ideas to be challenged. Too often, disagreement appears to be treated like evidence of some deeper flaw. If someone pushes back, it is not just that they see the issue differently. It is that their values are suspect, their motives are questionable, or their perspective is somehow morally compromised. And once debate starts being handled that way, it stops being debate at all. It becomes judgment. That may work inside a studio where emotional certainty is rewarded and applause helps reinforce the message. But outside that environment, the effect is very different. Outside that bubble, people start to notice when conversation is being replaced by branding. They notice when disagreement is not answered but condemned. And Megyn seems determined to force that contrast into the open.
I do think that there is a thing called pretty privilege. There is a thing called white privilege. There is a thing called tall privilege. And we have to acknowledge that. And unfortunately, there still is that stigma against the LGBTQ plus community. 70% of the WNBA is black. A third of the players are in the LGBTQ plus community. I think that people have a problem with basketball playing women that are lesbians. Who cares? They are great athletes.
What do you mean? They're queer plus trans?
They're trans.
Actually, they will have trans. They're going to have a washed up 38-year-old NBA player who's 6'8", 250, and he's going to realize I'm averaging 1 point and I actually just got cut from the Knicks, and I'm going to go and I'm going to average a triple-double, 30 points a game, and I'm going to put on a dress and they're going to call me Sal.
She also presses on another weakness, the gap between Sunny's public values and the way critics believe she applies them. Sunny frequently speaks in the language of empathy, fairness, accountability, and dialogue. Those are the ideals attached to her image. But Megyn leans into the argument that those ideals do not always appear evenly distributed. The empathy can seem selective. The openness can narrow quickly. The accountability can sound like something demanded from others more than practiced consistently by herself. That contradiction is powerful because it turns Sunny's own image against her. The more she presents herself as principled, the more obvious the inconsistency becomes when people feel those principles are being applied only in one direction. And once that perception sets in, the authority begins to erode from the inside. The image may still be polished, the delivery may still be forceful, but the foundation underneath it starts to look much weaker. The contrast with Megyn only makes the takedown harsher.
Hostin, who's upset about her white privilege and her pretty privilege. You know, Sunny Hostin is out there openly admitting that how much cosmetic work she's had done. So just take a seat on your pretty privilege. Okay, it's not just Sunny. There's sports writers Jamel Hill. She's met. And one other point. Okay, because this was just so annoying. One other point. Why is it a problem that the majority of WNBA players are black and Caitlin Collins?
Megyn's public identity has long been built around confrontation. Agree with her or disagree with her, she has built a reputation on stepping into hostile spaces and absorbing the backlash. Sunny, by comparison, appears strongest in a format that protects and amplifies her style. On The View, she has the perfect environment for her brand of moral certainty. But Megyn's argument is that once you remove that environment, once you take away the set, the structure, and the comfort of the format, the commanding presence may not feel nearly as strong, and that may be the most damaging point of all.
Was that my mother's family, while they are Puerto Rican, they actually originate from Spain. And the reason that they moved to Puerto Rico is because the slave trade had been sort of canceled in Spain and then Curacao, and then they moved all of their slaves to Puerto Rico. And so the family business, I have been told that they were printers and journalists, but they were in fact enslavers. At first I was deeply disappointed.
The slave thing is a bummer.
It's a bummer.
I can control it.
I still believe in reparations, by the way, so y'all can stop texting me and emailing me and saying that I'm a white girl and that I don't deserve reparations.
Okay. I'm not going to text you or email you, but it's true.
Guess there's nothing worse than to find out you're a white woman.
Because at that stage, the issue is no longer a single bad take or one heated exchange. The issue becomes whether the entire image has been oversold. Whether the authority people thought they were watching was actually built more on repetition, presentation, and the protection of the setting than on truly unshakable insight. That is why the ending hits so hard. Megyn Kelly's real argument is not simply that Sunny Hostin is wrong from time to time. It is that the persona itself may be far less formidable than it appears. Strip away the dramatic delivery, the moral posturing, the polished indignation, and the safety of the daytime television stage, and what remains may not be a fearless truth-teller at all. It may just be a familiar media personality, playing a familiar role and mistaking applause for influence. And once the audience sees that, the illusion becomes very hard to rebuild.